2024, 6 p.m. General rise. Pledge allegiance. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
No. Number 2, approval of the agenda. I'll take a motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
Jason, second. Roll call. All those in favor? Linda?
Linda, I.
Bob Moore, aye. Jason Stone, aye.
Lucy Petrella, aye. Lucy Dahlhammer, aye.
Damon Roback, aye.
Tom Minot, aye. Steve Delvecchio, aye.
No. All right, number 3, public comment. Do you have any in-person public comments? Oh, come on up. Yeah, come right up to the microphone.
Yeah, Chuck Stang, County Journal. Also Vice Chair of the Board of Finance, but I'm speaking tonight as an individual, not as a member of the Board of Finance. I have about 4 comments. They're all on the superintendent's proposed budgets, pages 43, 44, and 45. First item is actually something that you guys don't control, but I wish you would lean in however you can. As you all know, Durham got hit with a large swing this year. Middlefield got hit with a large swing last year. So I am imploring on you once again to help us fix that so that we have like a 5-year rolling average, so that I don't end up with $1.5 million increase because 10 more kids are born in Durham. It's crazy. That's the easy one. On page 45, I look at the net current expenditure per pupil. I look at this chart by every year. RSD13 is the highest for state average, for average regional school district, for average DURG C, and for, I mean, it just keeps growing. That's unsustainable. I'll move on, and I'll now move to page 43, which is your chart on projection of students by year. And what I found interesting on this is if I looked at births in the year 23-24 and the year 25-26, they're much lower than the year 24-25. So there's an anomaly in that data that I couldn't explain. And I would make your demographic people explain that to me because it's really strange. And students are what's driving the costs. Finally, on page 44 of your presentation, this has been my complaint about the style of this presentation for probably 10 years. The class size is depicted for pre-K, for grades 2 and 3, for grades 4 and 5, for grades 6, 7, and 8. And there it ends. So I have a page here that's blank for where probably the majority of the costs are going. So I ask you yourselves, what % of the budget is certified staff? First question. Second question, what percentage of the certified staff serves grades 9 through 12? Third question, what is the target ratio for students to staff in grades 9 through 12? And then Why is this presentation always blank? You guys should fill this in. Let us know. Do we have an average class size of 12, 15 for grades 9 to 12? I don't know how you would do it. I know it's difficult. You got kids. Various ninth graders are probably taking classes with 10th graders and all. So even if you could fill it out for all of the high school, what is the student ratio in the high school? That's my comment, because that's where most of your money is spent right here on staff. And you can explain that to me. I think I could support a budget. If you can't, then I can't support the budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
Any other in-person public comment? Is there any online? With hand raised? Okay, if you're online and you'd like to speak, just either unmute or raise your hand. Give you a second to do that. Okay. All right, with that, we will move on to number 4, 2024-2025 budget discussion. So we're at our second budget discussion on for this year. I know we left off, and I apologize, at the end of last meeting, I lost my voice completely. I do have most of it back. It's still getting there. And I know we were halfway through some of the questions that came through. Kim, would you rather start with those just to look through some of the questions, or I can go through them if you want.
If you would want to tell me which one.
Yeah, of course. You can pull them. I think everyone has a copy of it that I've sent.
You're gonna do the board questions?
Yeah, the board questions.
Ones that we didn't get to.
The ones we didn't get to, or even the ones that have come since the last session. We could do as
Just a
well.
couple. There was a couple from Lucy that actually came the next day. And then there's some that I just put on for clarification. just-
Right, and I'll let Kim go through this one. So there was a question on the savings for the turf. And I know we had talked about a little bit on that. So if you want to update us on the numbers on the turf.
Yeah, so I do need to make a budget correction for that. I was carrying the incorrect amount to finish it. Because we did lock it in when we signed, we did the half down. So we don't need the actual 130,000 that I had in there. We only need 25,000. So thankfully, that was caught and brought to my attention. And so the adjustment will need to be made for that. However, we can put that into, because it's already in capital, it can stay in capital under unanticipated building repairs and maintenance, which is probably a good thing to do at this point. So it doesn't change the budget at all if you don't want it to, because it's still fully funding the 2%. It's just a different projects it'll be tagged to.
I have a question. When money goes into the unanticipated repairs, what happens to it if it's not all spent? Does it stay there? or-
It does. It stays there from year to year, but it's typically used.
Okay, do we have a balance from last year? Any money left over?
Yep,
from
so
last
that shows on the capital reserve statement that I provide every month.
year? Okay.
And we did have a little balance. I'm not even sure we had a balance from last year. It'll take me a minute to look that up. Just bear with me for a minute.
Just curious.
Essentially, if there's any balance, though, it just rolls over to the next year, right?
Absolutely.
Right.
Okay, that's good. Good to know.
Do you want me to look up that amount or?
Yeah, you know, then we can go back
I
on
know.
the other stuff. Something that I had asked from last year's budget that I had remembered, and I wanted to make a point to just say it. We were talking about unified sports last year and how we wanted to try to start moving unified down from just the high school level, and incorporating it down to the lower levels. And so I had asked Doug and Kim whether we had followed through with it on this budget to start bringing that down. And they have. So under, and if you see it in the budget document, it's included. So there's a unified bowling alley for district wide for this year. And it would give us a good indication over the course of the year on how much engagement we have at the level and really how we can move forward with unified. So I did want everyone to know that that is in there. And we had some other questions about how robotics was being funded for this year. We had a lot of people reach out on it, and it was really great to see how much is really there for them, and how much, you know, the high school had asked for and they're gonna receive on that, which includes 3 competitions, I believe, at the level for the high school.
Four
Four
competitions.
competitions,
For 3 teams. Right now, we're
For 3
running 2.
teams, yeah.
Right now, we're running 2
Competitions.
teams and we're budgeting for 3 because we've had huge interest with the winning of states and going to New England's this weekend. It's been huge.
yeah, and they really are truly grateful and excited. I know we saw what came in from Diane Walsh, and it's getting kids interested in a lot of fields around engineering and robotics. So I'm pretty excited about that. And looking at Strong, so this year, the Strong robotics team, they had 1 competition, and they've now finished up for the year. So the question was, were we funding Strong enough so that they could do the competitions they need for that full year? And, you know, it's nice to see. So this budget includes 3 competitions. It's 2, and if the Strong went to states, so that gives them that budget. And another big question we had was the moving expenses for this reconfiguration coming up in this year, whether that was included in the following year and whether we had enough in there. And it's actually in this year's budget. So we're going to pull it from 23-24. So it's not an inclusion of anything on our budget coming up. And I know Bob had some questions from last. I don't know if you wanted to.
Yeah, my questions are really about, there's been a 2-year reduction in math. I would like to see that restored. I'm concerned about it in terms of our pathways program, concerned about all the engineering we're looking at. And I know that the higher level maths are difficult for everybody, but we need to have, you know, the best skills we can there. And whether it's a half a person or a full person, I think it should be restored. It was last year, so it's not just this year, but. And also, I was concerned that in the music program, that Strong has a higher music budget right now than high school. And I know why, because we moved the band director over there. But it seems to me that investment in plays and musicals and all those other concerts, that, you know, our investment in the music program has always been critical to the identity of the school. We have outside support in music and in athletics are 2 things that bring families back to this high school. And, you know, we need to make sure that we are providing enough for that. So I was concerned that the lowering of the music budget in the high school is going to have an impact on attracting kids and keeping kids. And I noticed that the size of the band and Strong is low, and the size of the chorus and Strong is really low. So it's hard to get a kid back, I think, in high school that hasn't been singing for 2 years. So yeah, I think there needs to be a really careful look at those 2 programs, the math and the music. I know Kim said there were stipends in music, but I actually couldn't find them in the budget, Kim.
There's a separate line.
I know it's a separate line item, but I couldn't see it in the line item by budget, by line item. And
And the stipends are for like a team lead stipend, or are there stipends for?
well, for, you know, working on the play, working on,
Okay.
you know, I saw them all for the athletics, but I didn't see them for the.
Yeah, we thought that it was important in looking at high school versus middle school for music, that there was the salary line that Bob referenced, but there's also quite a few stipends at the high school and
I don't
a
want to
couple at
put
the middle school.
Deb on the spot. And I
Wow,
just
yeah.
looked over and I was like, well,
Yeah, she's here to
I
answer
am.
Look back where you have-
Absolutely.
That's what I was looking at.
that you
I know.
want to.
I'm all right. Thank you for being concerned.
You want to start with the math?
I was gonna start with music.
Okay, start with music.
So, Bob, you're completely right. Getting kids back into music, I hate to use the COVID word, but after COVID has been really difficult. And one of the things we did see, last year when we did push registration was, a really small band. Basically, you know, he went down to a couple sections. So one of the strategies, between Katie being a band person and Liza being a band person and Cheryl and I was, to reconnect kids to our band director and know who our band director is. It's our intention, and we didn't really talk about this, Doug, but it is our intention that Tim will be back with us full time. It's allocated there now because he's co-teaching some classes, but the interest in band has increased. Our course registration for band from the 8th grade coming to the high school is higher than it was last year, which is exactly what we wanted percentage wise, which is exactly what we wanted to see. And so his band classes we'll probably have to have 2 sections, where this year we only needed 1 just because of the numbers. So we're trying to re-engage the kids in, hey, there is a through line from 6th grade to high school at least. And I know our current band director is a catalyst in that. I know once they meet him, they really appreciate him. And there was one in particular that said, well, I have to go to the high school because I have to, excuse me for not knowing what instrument, because I don't, but you know, said to Katie, because I have to play the French horn or whatever it is for Mr. Fisher. I was like, all right, I'll take it. You know, like ones that we haven't had before. So, you know, we are intending and, you know, to go along with, you know, some of the other things, the STEM offerings in music, to put those back in it as well, to make sure that the kids can have an experience, even if they're not a band or chorus kid. So the guitar, the electronic music that we have in, and fill his schedule at the high school. That is our intent. And I know Cheryl is looking at another way to run lessons at the high school. This was a nice marriage of from where they were in middle school to where they are now, where the lesson program was separate from the band program, and they had a lot of music time, which was great. But now Tim was able to help give lessons. But I know Lisa's been visiting other schools and trying to figure out a way to give them both experiences there as one band teacher, so that we can reclaim our band director up at the high school, and then that salary would be reallocated back, is how I understand the budget, right?
I'll defer to Kim on that.
Right, am I right about that? Okay.
But if you're gonna do that, you gotta move the budget back. Because right now it's.
Right, well, we haven't, because we're course selection, I'm gonna guess, and if I'm wrong on this, just let me know, because course selection is not solidified, it's kind of like that moving piece between tech and math with somebody like Diane Walsh. If we needed one more math class, then we'd be down 1 tech. And so because we haven't finished those course, not one whole, like 1 class, because we haven't finished and placed the kids in their classes yet, we don't have that final number, so.
Yeah,
Right.
I'll defer to Kim, but again, in my experience, the master schedules, especially at the high school, are a lot of times post-budget adoption.
Yeah,
So
we haven't
the
run
budget
it
is more
yet.
reflective of the current that we kind of plug in just to show, because the salary lines don't change. We're still employing the same people, but how we actually utilize them would not catch up until the following years.
Right, and now the FTE report they get every month, it's where it's sort of reconciled.
Yeah, I know, where it is.
So that's our intention, and so, yeah, I would imagine that if that all worked out, when you see this next year, that's how it would look, that he's up here, that the band director.
Well, we'll see it in
Visit.
September, right?
You'll see it in September, but you'll see it on paper next year.
Well, Kim gives us the FTE in September, so. we can
Right,
see.
exactly. And we should, I mean, you know, and I often avoid this, you know, in June or whatever, to give you an update on, you know, what classes are running, what classes aren't. If you guys want to hear all that, what, you know, minutia when we're ready, when Katie and I are ready, we'll definitely give you a report or whatever you would like to see on that. That's fine.
Do you have any indication? I think I asked that last meeting, or even student achievement. Do you have any indication on electives coming up for the 9th graders? Like what they've chosen? Do we think that we're gonna?
Well, we were strategic. I'll use the word strategic this year, where we used to have them just choose like 4 electives because we knew a lot didn't fit in, especially for the freshmen. This year, we made them choose 4 primary and 8 secondary, because we want to know what they might be interested in if there's a hole in their schedule. And we don't know unless something's on paper. So they're up to 10 or 12 that they could choose. So when we run the schedule, we can always look at your son's schedule and say, well, he didn't get into these 4 electives. there's a study hall, but he's interested in these, oh, he can go into this class so that we can run those. As far as like what is the highest interest, we don't run it that way. We just run it by classes that we've run in the past. We just gave the teachers their packets this week about what was a primary and a secondary choice for kids, so we can start to talk about class sizes. Because again, the board last year really asked me to look at class sizes and where we were, and I really am trying not to run classes that don't have an interest under 10. There are exceptions to that rule always, because if there's a specialty class and it needs to run, or an AP class that has 9, I'm not gonna take that experience away if we have the teacher to teach it. But we make those decisions strategically with the teams and with the department heads. So I don't know if I really answered your question, but
No, you definitely did. And I think when you look at the class sizes, and I know we gave, some recommendations for class sizes too, but I want to make sure when we're looking at pathways and we're looking at, what the kids are really interested in, that if we've got 4 kids that are interested in one thing and we know it's their number one, how we can find a way for those kids to get that. And I understand Tim going down to Strong. You got he's got a classic community builder who's incredibly talented, and I see where he's, gauged that interest back. But I think it's hard not to see it at the high school, because I think the kids really need him. So it's like we did something to build the program, but in the meantime, those relationships were kind of, put some distance into. So, I think it does, it's going to be good for the program, but it's hard to not see the band director up there, and that was, something we've all talked about. And
absolutely.
so that will be good to see.
As far as math, same thing kind of holds true. You guys, had me do the class size analysis last year. With the addition of everybody being able to teach 5 because of the teacher's contract, and then not having the interventionist, it's really only a change of 0.2, 1 class, which with our numbers, we were able to manage. I understand your point and I agree with you. And I said this at Student Achievement last week. I think, now that we have our feet under us about pathways, we had a meeting today with Liza and Katie. We need to start talking about almost electives in some of those areas. Math doesn't have a lot of electives, for example, so we do need to be forward thinking about that. I am pretty confident, even doing the math averages this year with that 1 class, and I'll explain the 1 class of 29, because I think you brought it up last week, but our math class averages is 16. That's the average math class size in our building. There is one of 29. It's it's a brand new AP pre-calculus class. And I'm supposed to talk position, not person, but the person that is teaching it. When we went to the department and talked to her, we gave her the choice of splitting it or keeping it. And they prefer to teach their 2 tech ed classes and keep the 29. Because if not, they would have gone down to 1 tech ed class, but it was completely the department's decision, the teacher and the department's decision.
Does that track with other districts, how that a pre-calculus class would work?
So this is brand new, so the bubble was big. I don't think the people requesting it for next year, I don't think we have 30 requesting it again, because we don't have 30 kids at that level of math to request it. We had a lot of juniors and a lot of seniors request that class because it was the first year that was offered. So if they didn't make it all the way to calculus or AP calculus as a senior, they could take AP pre-calculus as a senior and AP pre-calculus as a junior. So we had double the amount of kids that could take it. So it's not, I don't have the number in front of me, but I can't imagine it'll trend that way again. It should just be juniors and maybe a few seniors that, aren't at that level.
And can we offer AP stat at the same time?
We are, I believe we are this year. I could be wrong. This is when Katie needs to come to these meetings.
Well, I think AP statistics was in there.
Yeah.
Because I looked over it today for quote, yeah.
And that, I was gonna say yes, right? She's done it, Claire, isn't it? No, she's in Cal. So we do, and to Lindsay's point, we try to run every single AP that we can, that we have interest in. Barring, 4 kids, we're really trying to keep those AP classes running. we may at some point need to look at an every other year schedule for some of these. When you get so many in a department, then you have to strategically run them every other year, and that is in the shoreline, pretty typical.
Or
Then you,
a teacher.
right, or, well, because you don't have the kids, because it's the same math kids that would take the 4 or 5 APs. And so if you can run it every other year, you can get them in the 4 years, or do it your way and have another teacher, but then the class sizes are smaller too, which is fine.
How small would they go on that?
I think when I did the analysis last year, we had a couple, not just in that department, but we had a couple AP classes that were running at 5 or 7. Which,
And you know, to Deb's credit and Katie, you know, we've tried to say all electives, and a lot of AP courses are electives, that there is some onus on the teacher to recruit into those courses around some of these minimums, because absent that, how is a teacher incentivized if they know they can teach a class of 3 or 4? And, you know,
it's also hard, very
that
hard.
was my calling. I've told
Yeah,
you guys
you
when I
are.
was an AP physics teacher, like we were told, if you didn't get 20 in the class isn't running. So
Yeah.
like you're motivated to do that. And it's not like every kid you approach is gonna do that, but some kids, if you ask them, that's all it takes.
Yeah.
And so I think I applaud you guys for that culture change. And the staff has responded too. I think they're actively doing that.
They have, and I was just gonna say, especially like in world language, where we're running honors and AP, when you get to like Spanish 5 or not in French, because we just have the one French teacher. But that teacher has really looked at her class as a whole and decided, do I run the AP class next year? Or do I pull it back and run just the honors class? And I'm sure she speaks to her Spanish 4 kids about that before she goes, because they don't need Spanish 5. I mean, for the state, they only need 1 year. For colleges, they're looking for 3. They love 4. But not everybody, you know, again, takes the AP test. So then the kids she gets into a bind sometimes that they won't take the AP, but they would take the honors. Oh, it's definitely, I've learned a lot, obviously, since I've been up here, but it's definitely a collegial decision with the department and the department heads. I give a lot to them because they've been doing it longer than I, and they know what the kids trend day to day.
And all freshmen take algebra?
So there's an integrated algebra class. So there's an integrated 1, 2, and 3, which teaches algebra 1 and 2 in 3 years for the kids that, you know, don't, that need a little more time. We have a section of kids that take algebra 1 when they come in, but we have a section of freshmen that take geometry when they come in because they've taken algebra 1 as an 8th grader. So they're all over the place. They can be all over the place, pretty much split between the 3 of those. And, you know, then again, the leveling, which we've talked about before, and we continue to talk about as departments to get closer to center, I'd say. I don't want to get all close to
No,
center.
I just like to make sure that we have a math department that's bold, big enough and strong enough to meet the needs of the kids that are going into college and are looking to take AP courses. They have those at this level, and if we're not able to provide that, we're going to lose kids to schools that can provide that.
Mhm.
And the same with, you know, the other discussion. So it's just, you know, very important to me that we look at making sure we have enough staff to deliver the courses that our kids are looking for to get into college.
And I think a lot of those pathways, to Bob's point, are gonna have math integrated into them. You look at the engineering pathways, I know that those are gonna be a question too. So I think Bob's concerns are pretty valid.
There's high level engineering math that is, you know, a combination of many of those classes along with basic math review that you need to do some of the manufacturing stuff. So, you know, those are the elective type courses that we talked about today with Liza. I don't know what that looks like. I would defer to some of the colleges to see their syllabi to see what that looks like, because, you know, if you go in and you call it a basic math, it's not a basic math. It's not a remedial math. It's a rigorous, like, if you want to weld or you want to even healthcare, if you want called it something different today, but if you need to know how many milliliters to give somebody, you don't want to screw that up. Like, you know what I mean? Like you want to be able to, that's important math to all of us. And so is the calculus and so is we added the AP calculus this year too, which is new. And that's why I think it was so popular. So we were able to add an AP class this year.
I think it's also kind of important to keep on the horizon the fact that the trajectory in math is changing from AP Calc being the end all be all. That data science is actually what is becoming preferred for our students, because unless you're going to go into engineering, AP Calc doesn't have a whole lot of impact on your educational trajectory. However, the data sciences are showing up as a much preferred trajectory for like 80% of students. I made that up. Take that percentage out. I made that up. Let me be honest. It's the NyQuil.
Well, true, Linda, and the other thing we talked about today, we talked about our business pathway and we're looking at like a concentration in finance. And really, if kids can't figure out gains and losses and percentage increase and percentage losses, I mean, and they want to go into finance, that's a lot of math that they always say, I'll never use this when they learn it in, you know, 8th grade. And I taught it, so I know most of them said to me, yeah, I'm never going to use that. But they really need to apply it to a pathway. And I think that's where some of the math is going to change as well. Like I agree, like, they're going to have to pay attention. So.
And I think too, I was at a CAPE meeting a couple weeks ago, and we were talking about math and engineering and the sciences and talking about it's hard because of the way that the teacher shortages have gone, is that it's the programs and the teachers aren't as tenured and robust in a lot of districts as they used to be. And I think it is something to look at if we need help at the high school level in some of these courses to get the kids what they really need to do, or, are the interventionists helping? Are the coaches helping? Do we need to move intervention up there? So I think looking at the data set that's coming out for the kids in those, we really need to tightly look at that. And it's going to be hard with the pathways, because, when you're talking about assessments and what the kids are learning and what they're coming out with, I just don't, to Bob's point, I don't want to see kids getting to their senior year and not having what they need in order to take that next step, whether it's careers or college or.
100%. I think that's one of the most important things with the newer staff in the math department and in other departments, late hiring just because of timing and whatever. We tried to hire all summer, not anyone's fault, not anyone's anything. But I think the professional development that I can provide them this summer in the areas that they have a lot of, the ones that are teaching APs and other things, they have a lot of opportunities, and the department is embracing them. So I know they want to. I think I have to. I mean, I think they need to go to those things and be part of that.
And I think even in the past 2 years on the board, I have a good handle on intervention at the K-5 level, and even a little bit of strong, but I think we very rarely talk about that here at the board level. So it might be something we want to talk about and say, like, when does intervention start at the high school? What are the targets where we're looking and saying, oh, this kid's close to missing the mark, are we meeting those needs? And I think that'll be some indication on FTE counts and what we have to
That's always
do.
been our concern.
Yeah.
And I think that's, and at the high school, that looks a little different than, the K-8 model, but that's absolutely a conversation with the math department to say, when the kid doesn't hit their mark, whatever the class is, what is the intervention plan? What is the support plan? I don't even want to call it intervention. What supports are in place for that kid? And what are their options if they're not hitting the mark? And that's a great discussion. Maria would be thrilled to have that discussion with us.
And it's hard too with parents, because it gets to that level and the parents don't know if their kids are missing the mark because they don't understand the content. Most parents don't know how to do
Not until they get, a D in the class or an F on the test. Absolutely.
Yep. Okay, so we can take a look at that. I just want to remind everyone, I know we have a placeholder for the 20th for April. Last year, we didn't use that placeholder. I do think we need one more budget discussion. Only because finance committee's kind of reached out that they'd like to have one more, and they're going to maybe have some recommendations between now and the 20th. So if there's anything tonight we talk about, I don't think we're there tonight. Then we can get to something next meeting.
Can you find a stipend?
on page 1 of that line item.
Yeah. Under
It's
that.
3/4 of the way down. And it says salaries, certified student activities, CRHS. And that's all the stipends, that's
Oh, it's-
drama, that's all, everything is put in there. The only things that are separately stated are athletics.
So that's the 60,000,
It is
69,000.
69, 643.
It's in the back page of the teacher's contract as well.
Yeah, I know where it is.
I didn't think you knew
Contract,
that. Because there's a lot of music ones.
Well, it's listed all as stipends under everything else.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Gotcha.
By name. And then it's not listed.
And just so we can kind of put a bow on this and maybe not have to bring Deb back on the 20th.
I like that.
It's
Love being here.
it's our recommendation still, as the proposed staffing levels are, I mean, again, she and I are not gonna turn away extra staff if the board wants to add staff, but we feel for this year, the proposed budget, we're in good shape to keep the class sizes as a reasonable level and continue to offer. However, we're not promising that for future years, especially as you build these pathways. We're also not promising we're definitely gonna add a bunch. That's still, that has to be built into it, and we're still gonna try to be mindful
Right.
about all of that.
And we're
But
already talking, I mean, I'm already talking about it going forward because now.
I guess my point is, we're not gonna be afraid to bring ads to you in the out years when we feel like they're necessary, but we don't in this cycle.
I apologize for this. I thought I put my budget and all my documents in my work bag. They're on my front seat. Do you guys mind if I grab them for
Yeah, of course.
2 minutes?
No, you're good.
Thank you very much. Sorry about that.
So before we go to, a discussion on the strategy for, reduction, there is one more. Sorry, I got really far and I start to lose it again. Underneath. In the uniform athletic budget, Kim and I went over this one. And I know we talked about a concern of, indoor track, outdoor track and cross country, making sure that they had the uniforms that they needed, especially we were talking about, the track team not having uniforms that matched, and that has to happen for relays. They're not up until next year. And so the recommendation would be to move baseball to next year. Their uniforms seem to be fine to wait 1 year. And then that would, what it would do is it would put us in a position, so indoor, outdoor track and cross country would be in this coming cycle. The cost of that would be 16,500. So we currently have allocated 10,000 for the uniforms coming up for this coming year. With baseball moving, that would put $10,000 towards the 16,500. My recommendation, only because we have teams that don't have uniforms that should be the caliber that we need to, is a reduction in line item for equipment 10-5-001-739-1-213-612 in the amount of $5,000. I would reduce that line item. It's the only line item in there. That 5,000 would go towards the uniforms so that the cross country team and the outdoor and indoor track team have uniforms next year. And that would leave 1,500, which Kim said.
Yeah, we actually 10,500, so it would make
10,500.
1,000, and it's a quote, so that would be sufficient.
Okay. And what that is, that's the equipment. It's $5,000. It's the 2-man sled for the football team. So I would make that motion to remove the 5,000 from that line item and put that towards the uniform budget for cross country, outdoor track and indoor track.
I'll second that.
Second, is there any discussion? Okay, I'll do a roll call. All those in favor, Linda,
Aye.
Maura,
Aye.
Bob,
One more eye. Jason Stoner.
Lucy Petrella, aye.
Lindsay Dahlheimer, aye.
David Rebecca, aye. Cameron, on aye.
All right, motion passes unanimously. All right, So let me find my notes on this one, and I will probably have Kim tell me I'm saying it wrong, actually. But she did an analysis of debt service, the payoff structure. And I know, she had sent over updated graphs for last meeting, that's in the Google Doc. And what it would do, so every 3 years, we have to spend down 85%, correct, of, I'll let Kim take that one. There you go. And she's looking at me like, uh-oh.
No, so this arises out of the $6.9 million bonding that was issued in 2022. It was authorized in 2019. They didn't take the money until 2022. We have 3 years to spend that. So it's not that it's every 3 years. We have 3 years to spend 85% of that. And we're not there because we have money in there that we had put in for booster mechanicals to $2.4 million that we haven't done because we don't know the disposition of the building. So that's just an aside, just a little piece of information. The strategy that I spoke to our bond counsel about is when you sell a bond, you basically do an RFP for buyers. And you select the person who's going to charge you the least amount of interest. And then also a lot of times they throw in a premium so that you will bid them. So while you're selling 6.9 million, you might get 7.3 million. And then that additionals, that's what's called premium. And then that just stays in your capital reserve account. And there are a couple different uses for that. One would be able to use it as a contingency if your money ran out. A second one would be to just give it back if you don't want it, pay it off, you don't owe it. And the third would be to use it yearly to pay your debt service out of your and move it out of your operating budget. So we've kind of just, and we're earning interest on it. So we've left it in there as an unknown for the last 2 years. But we have a unique opportunity with this budget cycle of 24-25 that we have debt service dropping off. And that's debt service from previous projects. It's old debt service. It's from well work and the athletic stadium, all that kind of stuff. It's the last year, it's retiring. That will leave us just with the 6.9 million debt. But with that said, we are dropping debt from 24-25 to 25-26 in the amount of $344,000. So we're here for 24-25, 25-26, we're here. I'm suggesting we move the general fund to fund it at this amount so that we don't have an increase the next year. And the amount here that's more for the 24-25, we use the bond premium. Perfectly legal, and it's an opportunity to lower the budget by 0.87. I don't have a strong opinion if you should choose to do that or not. It's just, I'd be remiss if I didn't offer that as a budget strategy for you to consider.
What would be like the only cons that if someone was to bring up negative to that?
So a con would be that we wouldn't have that money to be able to spend if any of our projects ran over.
Okay.
We do have $900,000 in bond contingency though. So we do have a little bit of a savings. And that was built into the 6.9. That was, so I don't really see a con. And also that piece of information that I talked about earlier with the 3 years, we're gonna have to abandon our projects if we don't spend 85%. So this helps us get to the 85% too by using that 344. But again, like I said, this is for if it's too aggressive, you're too nervous, if you're whatever, it's a strategy I put out there for you to consider that I want you to be comfortable with.
But you're comfortable with
I
it.
am completely comfortable.
And I'm
with it.
comfortable with it. And could you at least remind them what the numbers would go to from the proposed budget?
Yes,
So
so
that's different,
right
yeah.
now we're at a 4.48 gross and we're at a net of 3.82. That reduction would reduce it by 0.87, so almost 1%. And we'd go down to a 3.61 gross and a 2.91 net.
2.91.
91.
And I know we talk about it all the time, Kim, but for one more time, so I know we talked about it, can you go over the gross versus the net and why our net is lower this year?
Absolutely. So gross is just all the expenditures and net is expenditures minus revenue. And we're lower in our net this year because I've isolated a surplus in a couple of accounts, half of it in electricity that we just didn't spend, that I'm able to apply as a surplus to next year. And then that lowers it even lower than, because a lot of times, usually the gross will be higher than the net. we've had years where it wasn't because our fund
Wow.
balance was so low.
Yeah.
But we have this opportunity to use that surplus.
And which one is applied to the towns in terms of the funding?
The net, so the towns pay off the net, so after revenue, and revenue being interest income, any kind of rental fees, parking fees, passes, for the kids, there's certain refunds we get for our demand response with our electricity. So our excess cost grants, so it's net of, that's all our revenue.
We're pretty happy if we could get 2.9 net out there and to referendum. That, you know, we don't have everybody else's information, but just in my sidebars with my colleagues, we're in pretty good shape compared, especially given that we're still in a pretty inflationary period.
Do you have numbers, updated numbers from Casco?
I do.
Okay.
As of today, all districts in Connecticut that are reporting, again, they don't all report, the average of the superintendent proposed budget is 5.03. And the boards of eds have reduced it to 4.81. Average of regionals, 8 out of 15 are reporting. Superintendent budget is 3.83 and the Board of Ed is 5.36. So they added there.
Do we think, and I saw that too, and I looked at CASPA, do we think that that was the superintendent cutting positions due to the ESSER funds and then the Board of Ed putting those positions back
If I
in?
had to guess, I would think so.
I've heard that from some of my
Yeah.
colleagues.
Right.
It's,
And we don't have that fiscal.
Right, because we chose, and that's been a huge thing, just, last board of directors meeting for CABE, we sat around and we're talking to districts, and there were a lot of districts, and I know we said this last meeting, that used, you know, ESSER funds to fund positions and fund staffing. We've been really fortunate. I mean, probably at the time, we probably dug to some heat at the time that we weren't, you know, using that for staffing. But now we've hit that fiscal cliff and districts are saying, I've got 34 positions used with ESSER funds, and now, you know, I think districts hoped and prayed that the state would come in and save and say, you know, we'll give you the money for these to continue a couple more years. And the state doesn't look like that's happening at all. They're, I mean, they really do feel for the districts, but just sitting on a lot of the legislative meetings, like they're just saying you're on your own. You made the decision how to spend your ESSER funds. So, you know, there are a couple of big things that we are fortunate, I think, this cycle to not have to really look at, and that really being one of them. I believe Danbury's at 20% increase in their budget this year, and it's all ESSER funds.
Meriden in the same boat.
Meriden's high too. They did a lot of staffing with the ESSER funds too. So, you know, I think that's you know, we weathered COVID without having to do that, and that's a thing to be really proud of for us.
We were able to provide the services to the students by using our existing staff and paying for tutoring after hours or, you know, kind of summer camps, things like that.
And how much of the 6.9 is unexpended?
At least I'll look it up, but there's probably at least 4.5. So
And
we're not
And
having.
are we able to spend that?
So some of that was the culvert. We had some culvert money in there, so we
got
can reallocate
reimbursed.
that. Yeah, because we got the grant. We didn't know we were gonna get the grant. But so then if the Brewster project, if we do it and it runs more than the 2.4, because that was a price back in 2019.
Yeah,
We can use some of that, the funds that were in the culvert or the contingency. So you keep it in there.
yeah, except that it has to be named in the bond issue, what projects we were gonna work on.
Absolutely, and you have to stay within that. You can't add any
Yeah.
project in
Yeah,
that.
create a new project.
In that.
And the 300,000 that you said was the premium that was offered at the time of the sale.
Yes.
And are we earning interest on that
We
and
are.
arbitrage? Is that okay?
Yes, so yes, so actually, when I say the 344, that does include some interest. So the bond premium was a little less than that, but the 344 includes the interest that we've been earning the last few years on
Yeah.
$6 million. And yes, we're earning less than we're paying, which is the arbitrage issue.
Right.
So we're.
Okay, and there's really no other use of this money as far as you can see, unless we run over on one of the projects we aren't building.
Yeah.
So far.
And if you're not comfortable, with the full amount, you can come to an amount you are comfortable with, but I'm comfortable with.
And I think
And
it's
there-
hard too, looking at that with that 2.91, if we go up any more on that gross, we're up over 3 on the net. I don't want to see either.
And would there be a way to use that to pay off other debt?
That, well, we're paying off old debt with that money, is essentially what we're doing. So if we don't use it this year, can we use it next year? Absolutely. And that'll just reduce next year's. Now, are you talking about future? We've got that 3-year rule.
Yeah,
And we're gonna be up against that in a year. So will it be able to pay down debt for potential reconfiguration and renovation? It will not be available.
so you're just proposing to take the 300,000 and put it in the capital budget, or put it in our operating budget as a revenue,
Just a transfer from the capital.
and it'll appear as a revenue of some sort.
Yeah, and it means we won't see the dip next year, so we're saying we want to take advantage of it this year and know that then we won't recognize it next year, it'll stay level. Right?
Yes.
Okay, I think I said that right.
Yeah, so next year,
I've had to hear this 4 or 5 times for it to make sense. to me,
barring
so.
any new debt, which we wouldn't turn it around that quick anyways,
Right.
there will be no increase in the debt service line next year. It will actually just, we have level funded it. The following year, it goes down just a little bit until it's gone.
I actually think this was a brilliant idea by Kim personally. Again, you guys don't have to support it, but just for her to at least put it out there,
I just
I
want you to be
think,
comfortable with it.
you know,
It's an opportunity, and if you
Yeah.
are comfortable, then don't do it, but.
Well, I'm comfortable. I was just wondering if we should reinvest it in our other parts of the budget, like math or music or other areas.
You know, and I thought that too. It immediately thought you up when Kim brought this up to me, and it is
It's one
it
shot,
is
but-
valid. My concern is that I've been really trying really hard to engage both towns, and in doing that, you really see how tough this year is going to be. Durham just got their finance director back. They're barely through, even portions
Yeah.
of the budget. And, they're looking at some increases in different areas. And Middlefield's got a lot of projects going on. I think it's gonna be a tough year. No matter what we do, our due diligence to get as low as we can, but I think Durham especially is gonna have a tough year.
So I did also get some information today that the health insurance, I had been talking about that potentially could go lower. The prediction is it will go to 3.
Okay.
So I budgeted at 5. So each 1% is about 50,000 for us. So we have the potential to reduce. Should it happen? I don't want to do it yet.
Do we know for that?
They finalize them in April, and usually after, but I should have a comfort factor
Soon.
high before that, before we go to public.
That's
hearing.
district insurance.
That's health insurance.
That's our
yes.
health insurance.
For
state partnership plan, yes.
Yes,
That's not bad.
that's amazing.
That's,
Going up.
that's,
Well, ours going up.
yeah, that's,
That's crazy. So-
again, with inflation, that's
So
almost,
to-
that's almost a
to
negative.
Put it into perspective, that is really good.
And I think it's a gamble we took the first year.
Yep.
That, we were on the board and we said it was, this could go either way. And I have to say that just talking to other boards, like they're at a point, the ones that didn't take that state partner plan, the benefits are astronomical this year. I think Portland's one of them.
We have high claims still. We're one of the ones that the state partnership plan is not happy we're there. Because we have high claims.
But that goes in
and we're-
waves.
Yeah.
I mean, we've had that in the
It comes
past.
in waves.
It comes in
Yeah.
waves.
Yep.
But you're part of a larger pool, and that's the advantage.
Yep.
So we have the average and then we have the regionals. Was there another thing from Casper?
Yeah, Dirksey,
Yeah,
superintendent was 4.4 and BOE is 4.44. So just a slight increase there too.
so that, I'm even looking at the gross on the net, we're still under on gross and net by like a very large amount on those. And it was, looking at it, just to repeat it again, I think it's a weird year to look at averages because you've got some very large bubbles due to the fiscal cliff, and salaries and benefits, have been tough across the board. Do you want to see a motion on that or just a consensus to move that if needed to?
I don't need a motion, just direction from the board that that's.
Yeah, I think just like we talked about last time, like the athletic trainer and stuff like that, the more we can get consensus, we come back on the 20th, it's a shorter conversation and
Yeah,
it helps Kim load everything up for April 3rd, isn't it?
the third, yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, for April 3rd.
I think it makes total sense.
I think it does too, and I thank him for looking at ways to not only help the district, but the towns too, and.
Does anybody disagree or have any concerns?
Voices of God from the ceiling?
I like how everybody looks. At
I love numbers.
When you hear Linda, it's like, you love numbers. You also love music, right?
Yes, Moses.
Still missing. Okay, so if we're okay with doing the consensus on that one, I know there's a couple of things out there, that we're gonna bring up on the 20th, and I'll throw them into the Google Talk. Google Talk, wow, like TikTok, that's good. Google Doc,
We
apparently lost my voice and my brain.
knew what you meant.
And we could throw those in, anticipating, a short meeting on the 20th, unless, anyone has any really big issues between now and then. I'm gonna engage the finance committee again, and invite them to the 20th and see, if there's anything on that Google Doc other than, what Nick had put in from that committee. We can address that at that time. Anything else you can think of?
Am I able to answer and give any answers to Chuck?
Oh, yeah, if you can. No, you could do that. That'd be great.
So Chuck, factual only, don't shoot the messenger. To your questions, the 5.1 million is the certified staff at the high school. That represents 12.5% of the budget. Strong's
I'm
salary,
just writing them down.
Oh, yeah.
Chuck's 12.5% is set as staff. Strong is 9.9%. And the elementaries are 6.5. So those are just straight facts. There's no judgment or reasoning, because that would be something that's not my realm. I do numbers. And we don't have a policy on high school class size. So that's why it's not shown in the book. So there's many different factors, again, that I can't necessarily speak to, why the class sizes what they are, but that's why it's not in the book, because we don't have a policy for that.
But if I can add, and Deb referenced this, a year ago, we asked them to take a hard look because we heard concerns about high school class sizes. And the conclusion, for those that weren't here, is that we're really doing about the best we can if we want to continue to offer the programs we're offering. And I mean, even tonight, you've heard suggestions that we should be offering more, and it is the inefficiency of operating a comprehensive high school with the number of children that we serve here. If we had 2,000, we would be so much more efficient. I'm not saying that's a
The
great.
economies of scale are against you.
Correct. And the class sizes are much easier to explain and capture at the younger grades, because you got a first grade teacher and he or she has 15 or 18 or 20 or whatever the number is. And the board has very specific guidelines around those. And so we always want to show that we are honoring those, not going over them certainly, but also not overstaffing at those levels. And I think for parents and families and for teachers too, there's a much closer eye on that at the elementary level, because you're typically having the same teacher all day long with those group of children. And so this is pretty much how it's been reported wherever I've been. But I don't think there's no deliberate hiding of anything here. It's
The dilemma we face constantly as a board is that we need to provide an appealing environment, knowing the number of choices that a student can take from 8th grade to wherever they want to go. It's in our interest to certainly do what we can fiscally possible to maintain what we're doing at the same time. Just make it so that they don't leave. We gotta stop the bleeding. I've said it before, and yeah, does it cost money? I guess so. But hopefully those numbers even out, and hopefully the district can find efficiencies with our overall thing, as we all know.
Well, it certainly would help once we become more efficient when it comes to the number of schools.
Oh, absolutely.
right. And the other piece, not to get overly mathematical here, but we have an 8-period schedule at the high school. Our teachers are contracted to teach 5 of those periods. If you think about that, the young person that takes a full schedule of 8 needs more than one teacher on average during the day. And it's, so again, we offer so many more electives at the high school, and we should. We have related arts at the elementary school, and we even reduced some of that last year because it's more predictable. But the high school, we don't just tell the kids you all have to rotate through the art class and the music class and the PE class like we do at elementary school. And there's a premium associated with that. And to Jamie's point, I would argue it's a worthwhile premium, but I do understand looking at the budget, how it would look like it's disproportionate, because to Kim's point, it is kind of on purpose.
So if I could respond, please.
Yeah, go ahead, Chuck. Yeah.
Thank you. So if you could then at least give us historical numbers from the year before in summation for 9, 10, 11, and 12. You could divide the number of certified staff and the number of teachers, and you wouldn't have a target, you'd have a historical, what are we running at?
That could be something that I could present at future budget meetings. I don't agree that it should be in the budget book because we're talking about the next year, but I can certainly present that at a future meeting, next year.
And I would say over the last several budget cycles, we've taken a very hard look at staffing at all levels, and the high school itself has reduced more than any other levels. And maybe they should have, maybe they were in a different place. But again, I want to give Deb credit because that's not an easy thing to face parents or faculty or whoever in those spots. But we believe it's a balance between maintaining the programs and being responsible to these FTE counts. But we've also reduced at middle school and elementary school. So we haven't been, just completely arbitrary in this space.
And it does tell a different story, and I think you probably know this, like, as I was explaining about math, like, the 16 average class size doesn't do justice to the class of 29 or the class of 9. Like, it just doesn't tell the same story that the elementary numbers can tell. 18-1, when I was at Memorial and the 5th grades were all 18 and 19, it was easy to say that our class sizes are, 18-1 or whatever. It just, I understand what you're asking for, but there's just more to the story in high school. It took me a long time to wrap my head around it, but I understand what you're saying.
But I think that's too, I mean, you wrapped it around, but maybe it's something we do need to talk about more and to say what's in those classes and how it's benefiting the kids. I mean, even talking last year when we were talking about offering, Latin, and, there were just, I think it was 1 or 2 kids, there was 1. And so we made it so that we were, we didn't have a full-time teacher, but we made it so we were responsible enough fiscally to make it happen while still offering the programming. And I think more discussions about that, even, looking at student achievement, it might be something that we need to tell that story.
And that if you do that in world language, right, you do have a class of 1. We all know what an outlier does to averages, you know what I mean? You have to add that one in, that's a class. There's somebody that is with her, but they're not the teacher, it just gets a little more complicated. But there is ways to report it that, tell a story.
Yeah.
You know how data goes. I have a background in some data, and people can poke holes in all sorts of data, but I'm happy to provide whatever you guys want as we move forward.
I think I should add to the conversation too, out of that 5 million, that includes all the stipends for all the athletics. That includes all the after-school activities that Bob talked about, like the music stipend. So that's just
You're
not.
talking about
great
coaching stipend?
teaching, Coaching stipend.
Okay.
So what did I say?
No, you only said athletic stipend, so I didn't know if you're talking
So
about
it's
coaches.
athletic coaches, it's any kind of stipend for the drama club. It includes, different,
Yeah.
what's that?
Ticket takers.
Yeah, well, no, these are certified.
Oh, I'm
just
sorry.
getting certified.
Corrected.
But, so it's not, that's the psychologist is in there. That's the coaches that are the instructional coaches. So those are not all student facing people. I'd need a little time to pull that out and see what that number is. I couldn't do that right from this, but just keep that in mind too, that that's a chunk of it. So that would bring that 12.5 down.
And the class size would also be really hard to figure out in the high school because you'll have juniors with freshmen. So
Yeah,
one
Chuck
one
said that.
class,
He
you don't
understood
have the
that,
same
yeah.
grade.
Yeah.
You also
Thank
have-
you for answering my question.
Yeah, of
also
course.
have-
And Chuck, I know with finance, we did invite finance to come tonight and then to the 20th. If Jim can't come, I know he's more than happy to have you and we'll have you at the table. If you got a million questions, we're ready to hear them. So. We're here to listen, so thank you. Anything else?
How many world languages are we offering now? Just French and Spanish? We'll stop Latin altogether.
Yeah, our last student is taking AP Latin on virtual high school this year.
And we don't offer it in 7th and 8th grade anymore.
We do
either.
not.
Do we not offer it because it wasn't?
But we couldn't continue it.
We couldn't continue. We didn't have the interest again under the whole.
Well, I only asked that because I remember it was something, it was last year, or the year before, but the
Yeah.
board hadn't made a decision to cut Latin at that time.
So I do, I mean, if a learner came in and said, I really want to take Latin 1, we do have in the budget virtual high school options for things that that nobody else right now can teach, right?
Or
Because, I mean,
Mandarin Chinese or.
Mandarin,
it's like-
Chinese, German.
Language.
Yeah, it's
Um,
not whatever it is.
We had a student do American Sign Language. So, if in their conversations with the counselor, somebody says, well, I really wish you had, and we don't offer it, we can look on virtual high school and I'm happy to offer them that. The one problem, and it's not a problem, it's just a different thinking, is the ad drop period is very early and we don't get any money back and it's very expensive.
Right.
So without signing a contract and having the parents pay us back, I don't want to not give the kid an opportunity. But we did give one kid an opportunity this year to do something, and then the ad drop period came and went, and they were like, oh, forget it, I don't want to do it, and we lost one whole seat at virtual high school, and they can be rather expensive. So Kim and I have talked about ways to go about making that a little tighter for me and for the budget, because it's like my home budget. I don't like to pay for an app that I never use and then figure out that I paid for the whole year and can't get my money back.
I think that's hard with Latin too, only because we talk about the pathways and like human services and sciences, so much of it's rooted in Latin. So I know, I'm sure it's something that's on the science departments.
Well, we want to offer a medical terminology class, which is, I
Right,
think will
yeah,
cover
all
some of
written,
that,
all
which I
that
think will
stuff,
be
so-
great.
I knew I'd hear that probably out of your mouth. But, those are the things we worry about, were there reasons we had kids taking Latin for other reasons other than world language? And I think that, it's something to really continue to look at and make sure we're offering.
Absolutely.
Not relating to this year's budget, but do we foresee greater revenue with the investment that we put into the field house and the turf and all that?
Yeah, we'll be able
Next
to
year,
work it
like
out.
I know it might not be a union position or job, but how do we get that word out there and drum up interest? I know we have interest according to what you said in the past, but that might alleviate a few things next year if we can really generate revenue.
Yeah.
from
Even
that.
once we have lights and.
Yes,
Right,
yeah.
He's talking about renting the field.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's a lot of money.
There's a big demand. out there.
Big demand.
So who's the point person in the district that's kind of
Well, I can give you. one.
deciding what groups are gonna be coming and how many we're gonna?
Yeah, we would just try to get, I would just brainstorm and try to see, it could be me, I just
Yeah.
try to see what would the best, I'd get it out there, and then it's just, a lot of times it's word of mouth.
But my understanding is you think there's significant interest with what we're gonna be having.
Oh,
Yeah, we have a
if you
number
see
of
the districts,
inquiries
yeah.
now that when they find out we don't have facilities and lights, that they
Right.
still think.
Yeah, you open yourself up for tournaments, you open yourself up for band competitions, you open yourself up
Dance
for a lot of different
competitions,
things.
There's a lot of stuff. The only other question I had, before we go, so do we have budgeted into the schedule, into the budget for the rental of lights? And if we do, where does that money go if the lights are installed?
So I have taken it out aggressively with my fingers crossed that we have lights. If we don't have lights, we're going to have to rent them. And again, that goes along with that. There's some line items that don't get spent fully every year. And my hope is that I'll be able to just use, not transfer necessarily, but use that same purchase services line for those and just run over budget in that line. But I have not booked for lights because
We're on track for.
We are,
we are.
and we've had really good feedback. They're going through projects very quickly. It doesn't seem like anything's really stalled, and we should hear
Yeah.
soon, real soon.
And-
And we were lucky. The fact that we had all the paperwork, it was godsend that that the town, between the town and the district, we had all of that information on the lights to begin with.
And Musco's engaged and kind of ready to go when we say, so it's not like we even have to start getting, you know, where we're. I think but if we don't, we run the lights.
All right, with that, unless there's anything else, please, if you think of something, throw it into the document, make sure I want to make sure we talk about everything we need to on the 20th. And with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn. So moved. Lucy,
Second.
second by Jason. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you all. Deb, thank you for coming tonight. Thanks for coming. Have a good night. Lindsay, you coming tomorrow night?
It's over an hour.